Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, despite upward revisions, the Bahamas GDP barely growing.
Opposition leader Philip Brave Davis calls for more details on the Dominican immigration policy.
Dominicans now weighing in on that invite from the Prime Minister.
The Minister of Works believes that political interference could have played a part in those BPL contracts.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Topping news tonight, the country's gross domestic product limping along, growing by just 0.2% in 2016. That's according to the latest figures from the Department of Statistics revised data series for GDP released today.
The level in 2012, when last produced, was 8.4 billion, and it is now 10.7 billion, a 27.6% increase.
But despite this 27.6% increase, real GDP only increased by 0.2%. According to Assistant Director in the Department of Statistics, Clarice Turnquest, the construction industry played a huge factor.
It's general construction. It would have been whatever's ongoing projects. There were some that were coming, still had to be finished, and still work was still ongoing with those. And then from Hurricane Matthew, a lot of homes had repair afterwards, and businesses, and that would have impacted the construction industry.
The figures are the result of the supply and use table compiled by the Department of Statistics and covers the period 2012 to 2017. The figures released today are consistent with the stagnant growth projected by the International Monetary Fund and contrary to projections of the former administration of 1.5% growth in 2016. The sectors that contributed mostly at constant prices were consumption by households, which grew by nearly 2%, and government consumption, which increased by 5.2%.
Gross fixed capital formation also grew by 3.4%, due mainly to ongoing capital works, as well as major repairs from Hurricane Matthew. The imports of goods and services sector, which normally has a dampening effect on GDP growth, increased by 3.4%, led by growth in imported services of 21%. That based on data from the balance of payments.
Government consumption includes salaries and contracts. Level of GDP in 2012 was 8.4 billion, and at present it is 10.7 billion, which is a 27.6% increase. Back in May, then Prime Minister Perry Christie slashed a full percentage point off the Bahamas' projected economic growth for 2016, cutting real GDP expansion estimates to just 0.5%. While the 0.2% growth is still growth, it fell short of that 0.5% projected.
It's a 5-year study. It's a table that involves the supply and the use of all data, all goods and services available in the economy. So it requires a wide range of data, and so it's done every 5 years.
In other news, opposition leader Philip Brave Davis is remaining tight-lipped on whether he supports the government's plan to accept students and others from Dominica as that country rebuilds after being ravaged by Hurricane Maria. Davis says there is a definite need for more details before anyone can be comfortable with the plan. Jasmine Brown reports.
That Dominican immigration policy has received backlash from some members of the public. However, Davis says there are simply not enough details to say where he stands on the matter.
I think where the policy does not require a strain on the public purse, I think that is something that the Bahamian people could rally around. But where it's going to cost that, particularly what's happening in our own communities today, as you had heard from the member from Pine Ridge and what is happening in Grand Bahama, I think there has to be that balance that they have to think about.
Davis pointed out that there are other ways to assist, ways he says are not as controversial as relaxing immigration policies.
There is a standard policy of assistance to our CARICOM sisters in time of their disaster or need. And the policy has always been that we would give at least $100,000 as an immediate gift. That is nothing new. You'll find that is also, most countries have what they call the standard relief package that they would award immediately to countries in need.
During an emotional communication in the House of Assembly on Wednesday, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis revealed the government will relax immigration policies to assist Dominican students. Dr. Minnis was moved to tears as he spoke of the devastation on Dominica. What do you think about the emotions the Prime Minister showed?
As they said before, heavy is the crown that sits on the head of a leader, and perhaps the weight is getting to him.
The Prime Minister also intends to visit Dominica on Monday. Davis was invited on that trip. However, the PLP leader said he cannot make the trip, nor could any of his parliamentary colleagues. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, after some mixed reviews on the open invitation to Dominican students to reside in the Bahamas, some Dominicans are now weighing in on the idea. Here's April Sant.
A number of Dominicans say they don't expect for many of their family and friends to utilize that invite from the Prime Minister, just explaining that it may be a little bit more complex than one thinks. An invite to relax the country's immigration requirements for students of Dominica may be less of an issue than many appear to be making it out to be. Speaking to a number of Dominicans who live in the New Providence, they tell us the probability of their family and friends coming here may be slim to none, considering a number of issues.
We don't expect to see a lot of them. I will tell you, even now, still we have the limitation of information getting in. That's the first limitation. But at the end of the day, we don't expect to see that many. Some of our kids have already moved or moved off to probably St. Lucia, Barbados, possibly Trinidad, I'm not too sure.
Also, right?
And those places are closer, yeah. Even getting to the Bahamas is a bit difficult for Dominicans. Most times it includes an overnight stay, it includes coming through the states, that type of thing. You need to have a visa and everything. So we don't expect to see many kids coming up here, but we know that where their families, for example, Estelle and her family, these people may communicate directly with their family and say, hey, here's the option, you can come to live by me for a couple of months.
Dr. Alec explained that most of those kids need visas, explaining some may have to travel through the states to get here. Also explaining that those students have already moved to other islands closer to Dominica. Family medicine consultant Dr. Alphaeus Alec, who's been living in the Bahamas for over a decade now, says after brief encounters with his family residing in Dominica, he said they are far too consumed with other things. That includes rebuilding their homes and, in some cases, their livelihood.
My parents, they're not even considering the fact that they have no lights, no water, because Dominicans are resilient, and especially the people from the country areas, they're accustomed to living simple. For them, basic needs don't necessarily even include electricity, For them, once they have life and they have basic food, they will make it happen. Most of the people need to be there to help rebuild. So it's not necessarily like the entire island is evacuating. It's just that we're allowing our children to continue with their life in the meantime while we help to rebuild the nation.
And while Dr. Alec and Dr. Estelle Lavelle say they've lived away from their hometown of Dominica for some years now, they say the biggest concern is the lack of communication they're having just trying to reach them. Explaining in order for them to contact their family, they have to wait on them to travel a good distance for a hotspot area for phone signal.
I finally found out that my mother, well, actually I got a picture of my home, my childhood home, before I heard from my mother, and it was, all the roof was gone. And my mother is 83, and she was there with my brother, who was on crutches at the time for some injury. And I was like, okay, so I've got to prepare myself, because I don't know how my 83-year-old mother, where she would have hidden. And I heard from them the following day, and thankfully they were fine. And when the roof went, they went down into the basement, and then the river came down and flooded the basement, so they had to climb out waist-deep water and climb back into a bathroom to hide. And then the sea was coming in from one other end. And so when everything died down, then they went to the neighbor's lodge where they were able to get one of the remaining rooms that were intact. And so that was, I mean, at that point, I was just so relieved that they were alive, because it's 4 days without hearing any word. It's nerve-wracking.
Dominica has gotten quite a few offers of assistance from surrounding countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Antigua. Germany, the British Navy, and the United States have all provided and offered an aid. some sending military personnel and equipment to rescue residents who were stuck in their home. Those countries also provided hot meals while power remains down through most of the island.
It has been really amazing, the outpouring of just love from the Bahamian people. And we've all lived here for a number of years, and we're all married to Bahamians, and our lives are here. But it doesn't mean that our childhood home is forgotten at all. It is right there with us, and we're just really very appreciative of everybody who's come to assist.
Works Minister Desmond Bannister says that he is confident that political interference played a part in those contracts being awarded at Bahamas Power and Light. Georgia Bain reports.
The Minister of Works believes that political interference could have played a part in those BPL contracts.
Bannister revealed in Parliament last Wednesday that a company owned by PLP Chairman Emeritus Arrington Minky Isaacs and a company owned by the father of former Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald were awarded millions of dollars in contracts. Isaacs declined comment while Fitzgerald insisted he had no influence over the BPL contract and in no way benefited from it. Today, Bannister says he believes political interference played a part in who those contracts were awarded to.
I'm aware of the full report from the forensic accountants. What I've seen has been disappointing. It's been disappointing because politicians have involved themselves in the process in a manner that they ought not to have. And that is a reminder, I think, for all of us who are in political office now.
Bannister said these contracts being awarded to some persons who never entered the bidding process raises several red flags.
They raise some serious concerns, and they raise concerns particularly as to how we handle the money of the Bahamian people that is entrusted to us. So if you give some contract to somebody for $2 million when they didn't even bid in the tendering process, it speaks volumes about our irresponsibility and the caretaker role that we have in the country that we're not fulfilling. So we have given a mandate to our board to reform the process, and I look forward to that process being reformed in all of our corporations.
The former Attorney General questioned why Bannister would comment publicly on this when he claims police are reviewing the Ernest & Young audit, which uncovered this information. According to Bannister, the aim is not to name and shame.
There was political involvement. At some stage that information will come out, and hopefully we're not going to use it just to name and shame people, but we're going to use it so that we can learn some lessons about how things ought to work. The Bahamians ought to suitably qualify themselves so that they can, first of all, tender, put in the tender process, and secondly, that they can qualify to do the jobs properly.
Reporting for R News, I'm Georgia Bain.
Still to come on our news, just how much did hires in the run-up to the national election cost the public? A minister explains. Plus, a little later on, we're getting ready for Miami Carnival. Stay with us.